Greetings to those who enjoy thrilling horror stories. Join Mr. Dark Whispers and subscribe to my channel. Kindly share your feedback in the form of comments with your podcast locations. I was nearly killed by my ex-fiance. He was 27 and I was almost 20. We had a massive chow chow dog and a cat. The dog belonged to him while the cat was mine. We lived in a 3-bedroom house. A few months back, a friend Lacey came over to stay, but it went very badly. She was simply an opportunistic freak whom we had taken for dinner before the attack. Gavin, my then boyfriend, had just returned from his last trip until the day of the assault. Gavin was too tight about things around him, so he couldn't think of anything else to help. The chores and taking out the trash were unthinkable for him. Maybe the first sign was that I told him I'd hit him myself if he kept on being like that. The following day, we had a serious meal together with his mother and Lacey. Lacey pointed out that there was something wrong, but it wasn't what I thought at the time. Just this day, I knew that there was perhaps a problem. I can tell you that again now. That day, we came back home for a meal. I had my nails painted, and he was playing Mario Kart. Due to my mental problems and family stress, I found it hard to give him the help he needed. I have borderline personality disorder. So I told him to take a cold shower since I noticed he was acting strangely. I then tried to call his mother earlier. However, he yelled at me saying, "I want to jointly reach out to my mother." I went to the living room and asked his mother to call. Instead, he came out of the bathroom naked and shouted at the dog to attack me. His mother had also been worried and was calling me. He yelled that I had tried to kill him. So I rushed to the bedroom with his mother on the phone. He broke the door and slammed me against the closet doors and onto the ground. He said he would kill me. I crawled to get out, but he got me by the neck and again said he would kill me. I looked at my cat and it was all puffed up. I had never seen it like that before. I was really scared. He was squeezing my throat. I saw spots in front of my eyes. I thought I was going to die. I wondered what he would do with me if I died. He asked me if I knew what unspeakable things were. I told him about an assault I had experienced. He was angry and looked dead inside. He screamed at me to admit it. I begged him to forgive me. Then I could escape. I had no clothes on except shorts and a sweater. It was freezing cold. I ran from house to house. I heard him screaming for me. I felt like I was in a nightmare. All I could think was for him to not touch my dog. I already knew my dog was dead. Neighbors heard me yelling and came to help. An old lady called 911. She was afraid for herself. My parents live with Gavin's cousins. One person let me borrow their phone to call my mom. I told her everything. Gavin killed the dog and attacked me. Police arrived after so long, perhaps 5 or 6 cars with guns drawn. They told me to come outside with my hands up. Gavin was naked as he walked out in front of them. Once they restrained him, it seemed like they became lambs. They took him off to the patrol vehicle while an officer wanted my story, but others searched the house. Later, one officer approached me and asked how many dogs we had. I replied I had just 1 dog and a cat. Then I asked about Oli but found out he was already dead in the bathtub. Gavin had gone into the living room, killed him, put him in the bathroom, and filled up the tub before carrying his body there afterwards. The officer said they hadn't found the cat yet. I was sure he must have also killed my sweet Sterling. The thought of that made me panic, but I couldn't tell them anything. My eyes were blurry as I repeated over and over again that I wanted my cat. To find my cat. The officer asked if we had treats to coax him out. Eventually, they located him alive. He had been so scared that when they blocked the way, he started fighting them. When I spotted my sibling covered in blood, a wave of horror crashed over me. The room was a gruesome scene, reeking of blood and feces. I begged for us to leave. My brother Sterling lay on the bed, crying in a terrified, paralyzed state. As I was leaving the house, I asked the police to find my vape. Just then, Gavin's mom arrived, and in shock, I blurted that Gavin had killed him. She collapsed, crying like a child. I felt totally numb. 2 weeks after the tragedy, I was back home here, separated from my previous life with police and medical teams. I struggled to start anew. I borrowed my mom's makeup and went to parties, trying to fit in. My mom was quiet while I engaged with others. However, during the 2 years of court hearings, The truth emerged that Gavin earlier hadn't had a gun but then used one. I refused to learn how Gavin loaded that gun. While reviewing evidence, an officer accidentally revealed a baseball bat. This suggestion got stuck in my head about the killing. Gavin received no more than 10 months house arrest, yet I could not avoid the Story family's lawyer telling the police. Yes, I witnessed the incident myself while we drank, but I easily lost my way walking home alone late at night. Feeling quite insecure at 2 a.m., still wandering deserted streets, a car rushed, stopped in front, blocking me nearly. I felt scared when I turned left. Seeing staring me was truly a great mean black man. These times would usually be the time that people had to be vigilant. It was just after 2 a.m., and I was walking the empty streets, lost. I had drunk too much. I was about 7 to 8 miles from my friend's place. Suddenly, a car stopped in front of me. An angry-looking black man was staring at me. I felt scared. Many people would be scared in that situation, but I was silly. I waved at him as a greeting. It had been long since I had seen him, but he looked confused. To him, I was an outsider wanting to go to Mars. I was wondering why he was getting so mad. There was no need for that. It is just sad anyway. But anyway, I did not hear that thing at all when the officer from my police case said baseball bat. I just heard it recently and even did not want to know how Gavin had killed Ollie. I had also found out Gavin only got 10 months of house arrest for everything. I asked the man for a ride. He looked like a thug, covered in tattoos and a bandage on his arm. He had a gun in his shorts, but I felt calm. I told him where my friend's home is. He laughed with me. We chatted a bit. I forget what we said. He had been shot before. His girl left him when he got in trouble. He said he was driving around looking for someone to rob when he saw me. I had $200 in my purse. I didn't even think about that now. I didn't show my emotions. I answered him that I was a little surprised to learn that he wanted to be a rapper. He had already begun in the music career, and therefore I had to support him. I encouraged him to get it done. We reached my friend's place where he was to start rapping. I left the car and said simply, "Thank you for the ride." Somehow I was out of control, but then I was sure that he had taken me to my pal. I asked him if he wanted to smoke, but he said yes. Here we found my pals, who were surprised to see me with this strange black guy who seemed to be a gang member, and I felt he would rob me with a gun. At first, my friend's place is crowded. His room is at the end of the corridor where all friends were listening to music. Also in his closet are huge money. I was oblivious, but my new friend pulled out a piece from the gun safe before entering the room and placed it on top of the safe. The sight shocked everyone, but it was very cool. I guess he was showing that he was peaceful. Lucky for me, my calm friends continued. I prepared some joints to smoke without paying attention to the gun. We returned to his room and left the gun there. The guy became a friend of all my music-loving friends, but he took it with them when they left quietly. Now it is clear that this situation could become worse considering the amount of money in that cabinet. I wonder if that nasty thief and gang member was at one point actually a kind person. Maybe he had just had a tough time and a show of kindness plus drugs led to the night going wrong. It's been 10 years since that happened, yet I can't shake off that feeling. I could have been an FBI agent back then. Things might have been worse. When I was with my boyfriend, my husband met his cousin. We didn't have a lot to talk about. Initially, during our talks, we dealt with being addicts and having eating disorder. Our chats turned into lunch outs. The movies were not our thing, but there was something special when he kissed me afterward, as it was not like any other before. I told him we should stop sneaking a talk. I never regarded making my boyfriend feel bad about it. For a while, we didn't communicate, but then became friends again. He asked me out once I was starving ourselves without food. I refused on many occasions. I soon suggested that we could see each other one last time. It was a foolish move on my part. We went back to that same old place. He mentioned his employment and house. How glad he was for making me happy. It made me feel uneasy. I asked him to take me back home, but it was late. Instead, he went to a dark forest preserve car parking lot with me. I felt nervous since I was feeling lonely there, and got scared as he parked the car, turned the engine off, faced me saying that we are meant for each other. Even though I felt sorry for him, I just agreed. I had a tough time with my partner once. He usually became angry with me and used his strength on me before. That horrible day in the auto, I experienced a tricky situation. He changed his mood to the point of feeling sad. He then told me how much he adored me. After that, he tightens his grasp around my neck when I face front cables were on my shirt. I was in sheer fear and shock when suddenly I noticed the policeman peeking into my ear. The police officer may try to persuade me to take shelter away. I felt disturbed and confused. The officer questioned him for my name. I lied, saying no accident. I explained the cops having taken you home. I was scared since my husband might get into trouble with the law. Cops took me home. I didn't tell him about what happened in the auto until sometime later after our first meeting. I blamed myself for my husband driving under the influence. As time went on, I opened up regarding what he had done to me. He nearly killed me. The pain he caused lingers on me till now. I cannot bear his memory or see them any longer. I still recall that incident and wonder if I would be alive today if that officer had not been present there. Those ancient stories have come back to me, or sometimes they are so old that I might not easily recall them. I was talking on the phone with my former colleague from school untimely. I was largely unaware of the details that she was saying, but when she talked, I felt something. I recall we had just moved from the USA. The house we lived in was in a typical suburbs incidence. Near our area lived triplet children with whom I shared a good friendship. In the evening, I used to spend time with them, and my brother would accompany me home on foot when it got dark. As we walked back home one day, he noticed something strange behind us in daylight. He suddenly pushed me to the side of the house fencing and hid me behind the gate. I did not actually grasp what was going on. My brother was very playful. He tricked me before. For example, I believed him when he told me that my sister had lost her car into the sea. Therefore, in his warning, I couldn't trust a thing. I was looking at houses again, feeling as if someone was following us. I looked back, not calm at all. In that moment, I saw the man who had been tailing us. He was behind several houses by a fence. He wore a black hoodie with the hood up, black sweatpants, and white sneakers. Being a child, my vision was partly impaired due to a health issue, but I saw him clearly now as his jaw hung open. It was awful. Now that I am grown up, I suspect he might have had a jaw problem or drug issues. Back then, I was sure he was a demon. When my brother noticed me looking and about to panic, he told me to run home as fast as possible. We both ran fast, but we were terrified. We rented the upper part of this house only. The ground floor belonged to some other people. I did not know if that woman was home or not, just that I struggled to open and lock the door fast as I could. Looking up, I saw him standing nearby and staring at us with that jaw. After we visited Dad at his warehouse above which there was a small living area, we were about to leave. At that point, he led us to the back window to look for police officers who were everywhere in the yard. There were some standing in line and also a white van parked by the woods, which we kids found very sudden. I can't remember a lot about that particular day, but I remember how my dad spoke about how in the van were found a man and woman. The man had his mouth wide open, which shocked and disturbed my dad as he told me. When asked further questions concerning the female in there, he did not have any answers, probably because he thought she's dead, which I didn't know, apart from them being booked for trespassing. The rest I did not try finding out since my dad would forget this event. More than 10 years have passed, but still, when I think back, sometimes it scares me how unbelievable it was without any explanation. I talked with my brother hoping he would remember more than I did, but ended up getting a lecture about some medical condition for a man to have his mouth like that. Hez now being an irritating medical student. At times I think perhaps that man might have been merely drugged, yet this place was really secure. In my freshman year, there was this handsome guy in my father's work, music. To me, Alyssa was in senior, whereby she's confident, smart, well-dressed. She made her personal statement. The seniors feared freshmen during that time. Though I got fascinated, nobody noticed me as long as the queen could be thought of by all of them, whilst there was even a little shyness involved. Once in September on one Friday, I met a friend that I could not live without. This friend brought joy and curiosity into my life. Her handwritten notes were kind and special. I didn't believe she was complimenting me. I always submitted my homework to the teacher. The class example scared me sometimes because teachers could lose favorite students for lending others something that went wrong with them. So one of the beautiful dresses was bought for me by my parents. There was a girl who was pretty prominent dress, and I did not believe that got herself during that time. Truly enough, one day at lunch I found another tiny blue envelope at my locker. Such feeling lonely all of the time went away at this one. There were further on fully fledged and wondering why I feared of not having a good chance on his birthday erupting from within, when it was in fact I did not mind being generally one pleasant, socializing with a mixed crowd at the dance parties, that not a few girls had gone to look good, thus often that it felt like spent at the Insta posts of people who might be held out for later, having been there, have had their fiction before acquiring it again. The same for which Daniel experienced way too many that attending all events. But even though up to the highs of got excited with no success, it was quite similar with not many the number of those hits. It happened some or others kind of activities in my life. Once I burst from high school, in the end, I asked myself a lot if he was considering me clearly, as about the future between us or not, for he was like some gold. Boy, so far ahead, I bear his best being more beautiful, looked so as to those girls were like models in terms of appearance, but looked both at the same time. So definitely something I was grappling when we do such souls one desperately in actuality, or there ought to, the kind of abnormal taking place in there. Hardly they normally could bear its principle had effect. Thus what the spectacular success of me was very deeply anyhow. I always worried these regarding this matter until then it really had to be there today morning. Again, any questions? Especially the magic pill that take through, because some people could thereby look others different ones. It does strike much, is thus quite little different. Therefore, all men have ever been to the sense, here comes needs to establish oneself. Apart from the normal from the being, according to some, it must just go through a puzzle of a long time as well, all know for reasons thereupon. What about no guarantees of that? We'll be telling what such is another mystery thus well of the world must really have things determined. Just has been decided since we used let's save, perhaps trying to change, so once I thought I was probably different ways. Really people thus being one did, however, they passed pretty through everything. Who irrespective of those had been together but did not actually end up thus there should I stay. That was the only secret. Encompassing all matters had it over. On one day, I will do my best to study instead of crying. I prepared an electronic resume with details of my work and education for a specific application. The lecturer gave me a C, which was shocking as I was not ready for the exam. My mom often told me not to cry, instead to study hard and be well prepared. I didn't attend the party in April, so we couldn't talk much about it. I showed her all the reports for that entire year. I was worried the result would not be as I expected. I finally decided to start working together with my friends on the investigation. The same group of girls played detectives with each step they would follow. During the fourth period, one friend without class was going to act as detective, with lockers trying to catch the louse. It is true that the hidden messages were not from me, the quiet freshman, nor were they from any young men. They were written by Mrs. Gonzalez, the housekeeper. Out of all of us, she was the only one that knew me this well, but I figured no one had ever really talked with her. The notes she left for the past several months made it appear that she was the only one amongst my friends who understood me. I can confidently say that there have been no conversations held by the two of us. It seemed like she was privy to my life, and thus the notes showed that. For instance, she mentioned my field hockey practice sessions and the Facebook posts I'd been tagged in. She had come to watch me play ads only once whilst I was at the hockey game. Most of the time when she was following me, I did not notice that any of my friends was aware of it. Nonetheless, in the end, we all had a heart-to-heart talk about her. Because there was nothing that she was up to which was too bad, even though it was peculiar in a way that cannot be exactly described, such as the period when some music was played 5 years ago. I have previously read about far scarier things than this one. Still, it was one of the most frightening as well as curious experiences that I remember. I am now 33 years old, and I was born and brought up in the rural Midwest region. The major part of my life has been lived here. After providing a lot of information about my father, I have good memories of being with friends in the woods where there are few cars before the road was built. It is a long and winding tool with some beautiful, quiet spots for people to look around. It has only 10 parking spaces, 2 picnic tables, and a trash can, and it is hidden in the woods nearby. So it has been the place for teenage parties for a long time now. That's why it is my lovely getaway place. The things I had spent friendly evenings with my friends at the riverbank, and the parties we had showed good time for me. I had an argument with my girlfriend some time back. She was going to have a party with her friends. I was drinking heavily. I was unhappy, so I drove to my favorite spot to relax. Loud music was playing in my car as I also drove so fast. It was on my way that I saw a road that had a signpost for woody areas ahead. I was in a dark parking area. I was on alert and expectancy. There was laughter and shouts from a nearby group. I felt uneasy. I had parked near the trees and feared for wild animals. So, after the music, I was scared again. It began sounding like footsteps approaching. I quickly switched off the music. With that came a knock on the window. I looked back to see a big figure behind me. He looked intimidating and was yelling strange words. At first, I thought it was a person, but I could not see it well. The light from inside the car was dim. I could not make out the hooded figure's features. However, the man's jeans appeared gray. The man must have been at least 6 feet tall, so I thought he is a thief. It ended with me being lucky. I just forgot, and it occurred to me even for the least amount of time to just remain so completely immobile. None was aware it, and I had to count 5 seconds going on, but they were quite the longest seconds in my entire life to be seated there in silence and alone with me in my own car. I finally took off. Running was all I could do towards the nearest house, which was quite a short distance there away from the parking lot. That night was so frightening. Speedy exit from there, darts across the parking lot and returns back to the highway's edge where there are trees. Suddenly, I hear a sharp sound like gunshots. I stepped on the throttle and took off. A guy could have been after me. I looked ahead for an open space with the direction icon on my dashboard and sped at a high 90-odd rate on the highway. Luckily, I had a friend on fueling duty at a Frace, so I stopped there and told him of the car damage and went on with my rants. We diligently checked the car, and just short as expected, having had some major dents. There was an impression too on my passenger's door that was probably kicked in by my friend while I was leading in front. We told him the whole storyline and came to the conclusion of not calling police, but rather taking a drive straight to the police station instead. It would take a little under 2 hours from the point we were at before reaching where the guy was spotted. Therefore, it was apparent that the police would not reach in time. It simply occurred to me that I did not care. After all that I perceive this may be a case of robbery or even murder, I am relieved still that I acted fast. When I knew my spouse, I found John cordial. John was friendly and everybody liked him. My spouse grew up with John, they were best friends. John was sincere and always ready to help. Good friends are rare in today's world. We are religious and regard John as part of our family. John was a reader like us, so we had so much in common. We went out to eat and watched shows at home. We also played board games and discussed gadgets. My spouse and John loved computers. They shared programs they wrote. My spouse and I were into computers for a while. John came over to help with our projects. However, John never had a girlfriend the whole time. He had no dating experiences. I wonder why such an amiable fellow was single. It seemed that he had no relationships in his life. At first, we suspected he was gay, but thought he was afraid to tell us. His family was traditional. We were cautious not to pressure him. Then he moved to our city. It was a long trip, and he opened up to us. We realized he hadn't actually decided to move on himself. The house he moved to was his sister's for when she retires. At first he seemed fine, but later he withdrew. He stopped calling and was hard to reach. My husband missed him a lot. We were used to his company. We were worried. It's important for my husband not to lose touch with his best friend. We could not sit down without his mother noticing the sign. Actually, John had at all times sought for a new residence with some assistance from Mary, his sister. She bought the apartment for her retirement even if she is not yet to retire. John's early days in the new city, he seemed to be okay, but later he went quiet. He would not even like to answer calls or reply to messages. My husband was used to being with John and we worried about him. The distance could be an issue, but as days went by, but it was evident he missed John. This is why he reached out to him. To get our friendship back on track, I called John to visit him. I told him, "I hope you were not upset about my staying from you for 2 years, but we will meet again." It surprised me that he didn't notice we had not seen each other for a long time. His house shocked me. I thought it would be a cabin in the woods. It was hidden and hard to find. It was brainwaving. After the city's noise and rent, he could stay here. But the house looked dirty, and unkempt it was. Maybe John got no time to tidy the place up, so it was damp and smelly. He told us that he went to the city to avoid being promoted to extra hours at his job, which he did not want. It was a surprise that his home was like a bunker. I wondered why too. John's room was still like a 16-year-old's. It was a mess with computers all over like a summer camp. Oh, and stinkers. Such a sweet smell. When the boy's sister visits, he dislikes it a lot. I thought they could leave the house instead. First, we went for dinner, then shopped. About John, I wondered why he hadn't answered. He told me he didn't have a phone. My husband thought he needed to buy a cheap one. John lives nearby but does not have a place of his own. It is less costly for him to share an apartment with somebody. He has no money for dating since he is fixing his finances. I felt he wasn't completely honest with us. John should tell us his problems. Nevertheless, he was reserved and evaded our inquiries. He only updates his social media channels. I discovered something strange about John. I felt lucky that I was friends with JN. I used to follow him in public a lot, but it was then that I found out that he liked nothing but Nickelodeon shows. He could comment on the posts of Nick, but the comments were too brief. The comments were like, "I can't wait for the next episode," and "the last episode was so cool," yet he was almost 40 years old and still liked cartoons for kids. This made me think how I had like a kid's book. However, I couldn't spend time thinking about JN, he was just childlike in his ways. I know that there are some children who watch cartoons, but that does not mean they are kids. I didn't talk to my husband about what I was thinking. I just felt like I was nosy and had intruded JN's privacy. I just had stumbled upon this information without even trying to search for it. It wasn't even that important. It was just a way of expressing enjoyment, and 2 years later, JN left the industry. JN visited our home first time. I had to again go back to my mother, who used to travel with him, in order to make an effort and lure him to come again. I was feeling a bit different towards JN. Somehow, he was strange, or did he hide something from me? Initially, my husband felt that the friendship was gone and that we just had to go with the flow cowardly, which was a different one from what we felt. I was okay with it, and I thought, this is life. Since we grew up together, as kids or more children when we were kids, but during the event of life, we have started drifting apart slowly as we were growing up, I believe that such things happened. I had a talk with Jin that wasn't comfy. I felt small next to him. Jin talked down to me like a kid. I picked up good stuff by not speaking. He squatted down to be at my level. I felt mixed inside when he had to go low for me. He hurled words of courtesy, but I couldn't say more right, for it was awkward as that handshake did. The words came out only after I had the strong wish to speak. At first, though, I was tight-lipped for around 20 minutes, even though my jaws wanted to express. Jin was okay. He let me say what I wanted. Once I gave a gift I thought he didn't like, but I was wrong. He took me out for lunch once. It was great food, but I also carried bags for him. They were heavy. I did help, but also made him work hard. Almost every customer had those bags. My husband had a friend named John. Lately, he was feeling bad. My husband didn't want to call John because he felt sorry for him, so I did. I had his number. John gave me his new address. His mother now needed him home. I felt strange about my cousin John being aloof. My father wanted to meet him. John was gruff and not welcoming at all. He said he did not want to go home. He planned to stay away for 1 month. I doubted that winter floods could uproot him. He had only a sock and a few tools. He lived in a small apartment with his mom. This immigrant was clearly transient. Next month, we planned to go out, but it turned out to be dishonest. One day, he called me to come down. I thought he was playing a trick. I went down and found a very pale guy who looked at me. He said it was his heart that hurt. I told him to leave it at that. He wanted to turn on the television, so I sat next to him. I watched the news segment. Some guys were appearing in the courtrooms. Suddenly, John was being led with his BFF in an orange suit with hands and feet being shackled, and I thought I had gotten the wrong impression of him. My husband made a joke about a guy appearing in a video, which seemed like John, but this guy was John who has been jailed. There were some dark forces which moved him, thus became a child's enemy from then on. It turned out that my husband found the shocking information about John by chance. He viewed the local show over 20 times before calling me to come and see it. At first, I was speechless. When I calmed down afterwards, my husband searched for more details online. John's mom and sister being raided led to the finding of many child's exploitation materials that included having his DNA as a match with John, who was known to have started being a childhood involved in this act. Thus, there were not much more information given after that which happened after sentence. Serving of 30+ years. So it's old man by the time he has a hearing of parole, he will be under house arrest forever. He lost his sister's home and social media presence. Their family condemned him. Mom lost her third son. I feel so sorry for her. We cut contact, not visiting him in prison. My husband lost trust in friends. It's hard when your friend turns out to be different and a monster. John was good but a facade, just an illusion as a friend. When I was in college, my gas tank was low on the dark time. I drove away from the main road. It made me concerned, but I had to call for help from campus friends. However, at that moment, it was not easy to seek assistance. So I went to the nearest airport to get a small gas can for my truck and walked back. As I held the can, I saw a girl. I pushed the rear of her car away to show her the road. It was the first time that thought crossed my mind as she saw that I was lost in her eyes. Angry, I was like a kid who cannot wait for his turn. She was like a fast food server in a gown. While parked in front of her house, she saw me and came to me hesitantly. She asked if I needed help. I said I ran out of gas, and it was not far from Chevron if we walked through Not Easy Street. She was looking kind of scared. She thought I might be a threat. Thus, the first place I thought deserted. I figured out first that it was dark, she was kind of a little afraid, and I was man. She was weak. At that point, she could not tell whether or not I was pretending under these circumstances. They kept their distance from me. I was shocked by her extreme fear. I tried to reassure her that I had the fuel can and that she need not accompany me or anything. Really, I would pay her later on, but she would not take cash. After a while, she returned, handed me the can, then hesitated for a moment, seeming to be thinking whether or not to say something. Out of the blue, she asked, "Do you want to hear some weird stuff?" "Of course," I replied. She goes on, "Today got this prank call from someone. One time, I got a strange prank call. The person kept asking me if I have ever run out of gas. Then we both just laughed uncertainly and said goodbye. This call gives me chills now. About 10 years ago, my friend R and I used to sing in Tacoma at night. Once, we were on our way back to Seattle and stopped to get gas. The station was creepy. I was feeling hot and kept changing the radio stations. Suddenly, someone opened my door. He had dark skin, a vacant stare, and was medium height. It all happened so fast. To create an authentic female character, show her past. Use flashbacks to her childhood, seeking approval. This makes her relatable. Describe her appearance to reflect her personality. Unique hair or clothes signify a cultural group. Differentiate characters by gender, race, and emotions. This engages the audience in the heroine's feelings and experiences. It was hard for me to shut the door. The man had a horrible jacket that had holes from what looked like the inside out. His strength was immense. Every time I would attempt to shut the door, he would pull it open again. I was startled and frightened as I repeatedly tried to close the door. I thought to myself that I was about to ask him to stop. I would have said, "Could you please stop?" But before I could, I was jolted by a surge of nervousness. Suddenly, I began to shout loudly, which surprised me. I felt as though I was going insane. At the time, I was trying to get R into the picture. I urged him through the mic on what to do. He was later on successful in getting the stranger to move further away from my own vehicle. I am not quite sure if there were other people behind the station's perimeter. No one took note of the man who is now slowly retreating from us. R was acting like a bomb's going off, as he was trapping inside some nervousness. R directed a look through the vehicle towards the stranger who was walking towards him, which was still petrifying to me. But on the other hand, also I had thought that R's coolness might help us, and at last, we were now safe. At my last stop, I made attempts of remaining away from the shady areas, except only for the gas station.